And how we're going to do that is by digging into this concept called separation of concerns. Separation of concerns is a computer science principle that was introduced in the mid-1970s, and it's a design principles for separating a computer program into distinct sections. Each section addresses a separate concern and a set of information that affects the code of a computer program. A lot of people who work on the web might be familiar with separation of concerns through the lens of the three major languages of the web. So we have HTML, which provides the structure and semantic meaning for a web page. And we have CSS, which handles the style of a web page. And then we have JavaScript, which controls the behavior of a web page. So historically, this is what we've talked about when we talk about separation of concerns. To demonstrate this concept of separation of concerns, I like to use the analogy of a door. If you were to go to a hardware store to buy a door and its accompanying frame, what you would see is a finite number of doors built of different materials. Maybe one's a semi-hollow door, maybe one's built out of oak. But in any case, there are hinges on either the right or the left, and that door is going to open or close, right? So you have the sort of structure and the functionality of this door. And that structure and functionality of the door remains intact no matter what color you decide to paint that door, or really what kind of hardware you're going to put on that door, right? You might want matte black or brushed nickel or brass or some other material for your hinges and your handles and stuff like that. That door is going to continue to open and close, right? That's what we're talking about with the separation of concerns. The functionality and the structure are separate from the aesthetic styles. This has been a part of the web for a long time. All the way back in 2003, Dave Shea created the CSS Zen Garden to demonstrate this really powerful concept of separation of concerns. What the CSS Zen Garden demonstrated is that with the exact same markup, what we're looking at here, web designers can come in and create any number of different aesthetic results using the power of CSS, which is really, really magical. And that separation of concerns continues to serve us in organizations as we start looking at design systems. So coming back to Starbucks with their myriad instances in different aesthetics and sizes of buttons, but even for more complex organizations supporting multiple brands like Condé Nast, that has a lot of different brands with a lot of different visual styles, this separation of concerns really matters. Revisiting our button, what we can do is start to dig into this separation of concerns, because if we strip down what exactly is a button, right? What we're looking at is, well, this button can either be a link that links to another page of an experience, or it could submit or trigger an action, like an actual button tag in HTML. It can have an icon after it. It can have an icon before it. It could be an icon-only button. The button can have different visual styles, right? We call these like ghost buttons or some other language. Big buttons, small buttons, block level buttons that fill the width of their parent container, buttons that are marked up as buttons but look like hyperlinks. This is what we're talking about here when we're talking about the structure of what a button component is. But here's the thing. As the web evolved, the lines between the three languages of the web became a lot blurrier. So it's time to revisit the separation of concerns through this new era where lots of things are often authored in JavaScript. The lines between especially structure and behavior, but also mixing in styles as well, aren't so clearly defined. So what we could do is start to separate out the more structural aspects of any piece of UI and say, okay, the HTML, its semantic meaning, as well as sort of CSS structural styles. These are things like its layout. This is similar to the hinges of the door are either on the right or the left. Those are technically style properties that are positioning those hinges, but that really matters for the functionality or the behavior of that door. And of course, JavaScript makes all of this work and function and is often the delivery vehicle for this entire experience. So separate from that structure is the aesthetic styles, right? These are the more cosmetic styles. This is what color we're painting the door or what hardware we're installing as part of the door frame. So what we're doing is we're creating a separation of concerns between the component system, which handles the structure and the functionality of a given component, and the design token system, which handles the more aesthetic look and feel of the component. What this means in practice is we take the tokens in our design token system and flow them through the component system in order to achieve the appropriate UI result.